So what we're going to do is we're here to expose it, let people tell their story, and let everybody in the public see the horrors of the court system in Suffolk County, New York.
Long Island Backstory with Chief Correspondent Gary Jacobs.
Good afternoon. My name is Gary Jacobs. Welcome to Long Island Backstory, where we give you the stories that you don't get from your normal traditional news media. My guest today is Lorenzo Johnson, who served 16 and a half years in prison for a crime he didn't commit. Mr. Johnson was convicted of a murder in Pennsylvania and served 16 and a half years of a life sentence without the possibility of parole. He was then released for 4 months and then, in a cruel twist, sent back for another 5 years, after which time he was finally released for good. Sitting next to him is my good friend and exonoree, Jeffrey Deskovic, founder of the Jeffrey Deskovic Foundation, which only helps people who are wrongfully convicted, and that's going to be important when you hear today's story. They only help people who are convicted for crimes that they did not commit. So, guys, welcome to the program.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks for having us.
So, Lorenzo, let me ask you this: when did this nightmare begin?
December 15th, 1995.
And where were you living at the time?
Living in Yonkers, New York, but I was hanging out in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania.
Okay, so what crime were you arrested for?
First degree murder.
So, and I've seen you on other shows, and one of the questions that I wanted to ask, and people watch it ask, is why did they pick up Lorenzo Johnson for this murder that you didn't commit?
Well, I basically fell into the hands of some corrupt cops. I had got arrested for unrelated charge, and when I got arrested, being I was from New York, the cops was trying to make me lie on this case to give anybody the case. Like, you know, we're gonna point somebody out and you're gonna make the statement. And I didn't want to go along with their story. So what happened was, I was supposed to get charged for this unrelated case that I told you I got locked up for. I was supposed to get charged with fleeing and eluding from police, because that's what the charge was.
Fleeing and what?
And eluding, a misdemeanor.
Okay.
But what they did was, when I didn't want to comply with them, they gave me 3 counts of reckless endangerment on each 3 of the detectives that was in the car that chased me. So they gave me a $500,000 cash bail, and I had to sit in the county prison for 2 months. When I went to the hearing for these charges, they was all dismissed. So when I came home, then they came back with this.
So, but did you know the victims? I mean, they were in a different state.
I knew.
Was there any connection? I mean, they didn't just pick you out of nowhere from a different state. They wouldn't have even known you. So, how did they come to you from Pennsylvania?
What it is the block that we was all hanging out down there in Harrisburg on Market Street. That's where all the people from New York hang around at.
Okay.
So all the guys from all around New York, when they come to Harrisburg, they hang around on this certain block, and that's how I came into harm's way.
So they knew that you were one of the people who was hanging around.
Yeah.
And now I think if we, correct me if I'm wrong, that you guys were hanging there because there was some drug activity going on.
There was all type of stuff going on out there, but homicide wasn't one of them.
Right. Well, there's a difference between that. But, so you weren't there for good reason. So probably the police looked at you as a bad guy.
Oh no, I don't have a history down there with the police or any charges in Pennsylvania.
Okay.
I got caught up in an epidemic, whereas mass incarceration was also in full effect.
Right.
And I'm a black youth from the inner city that didn't have means to get attorneys and right representation. And for more part, family support, is really huge in that area when they get a hold of you.
Yeah, I want to talk about that in a second, but I just want to be clear. So you did not even know this victim?
No, I knew him from seeing him around. I didn't know him as far as engaged as a friend or anything like that.
Okay. So let's talk about the family life at the time you were living at home. Were you living with mom and dad? What was your support? What was your family life like?
I was working. I had a nice little family structure. It wasn't like I came from a homeless place. It's just that back in 1995, mass incarceration was for real.
Right. So
it's for real now. I'm not saying that it's not for real now, but back then it was, it was going on.
Okay, so you get arrested for this for a murder, and I'm sure your what were you thinking? Were you thinking, well, I didn't do it, I'm going to get a lawyer and he's going to get me off? There's obviously no evidence because you didn't do it.
When you're innocent and you're in prison, a lot of times we look at it as when we go to court, there's a mistake being made. When we go to court, it's all going to be, the truth is going to come out.
Right.
That's what you always tell yourself. The truth is going to come out. There's been a mistake here. And a lot of times we're illiterate to the law. So we don't know when a law is being broken. We just know that somebody's lying on us and this is not true.
So did you hire a lawyer or were you appointed a public defender?
I had a couple attorneys, but I went to trial with a public defender that was fresh out of law school.
Right. Which is, you think about it, you're going for life without parole would
Murder,
be
first degree,
murder
exactly.
first degree, and you're going with the guy fresh out of law school.
Female, yeah.
It's
out.
a scary. Were you scared, or did you still think going into trial that, well, there's still no evidence, so I'm not going to be convicted? By
the time I got to trial, so many things changed. The motive changed from the preliminary hearing to trial, which I never saw happen before. A lot of the witnesses started recanting, which I didn't understand what that was about. And I never had all of my discovery, and I was wondering, I'm going to court with when you're innocent in prison and you fight your case, you can only fight what they give you.
Right.
With case discovery, you can only fight what they give you. You don't, especially if you wasn't there when the crime was committed, you have no knowledge of it. So whatever pieces they give you in discovery, that's what you're going to fight off.
And you don't know what you don't know.
And you got to rely on your lawyer to do an investigation into either your alibi, your innocent claims, or anybody that can help you.
So what was your lawyer telling you throughout this whole time? Was she saying, hey, Lorenzo, don't worry, there's no evidence?
Nah, my attorney told me I'd be home by dinner. My trial lasted 2 days.
And did she do a good job? Was it just that there were so many people lying, or what was it the reason you got convicted?
None of my alibi witnesses was contacted. I went to trial with a partial discovery. But I was missing hundreds of pages of my case discovery. My case discovery started on page 9. So when if you go from 0 to 9, you think no disrespect to the lawyer, but a competent attorney will say, wait a minute, this starts from page 9. Where's 1 through 8?
So now you go to trial and you have a jury, and they convict you. Were you shocked?
I was crushed. When in Pennsylvania, it's natural life. It ain't like New York where possibility and it's different.
Right.
It's how can I say? It's like
hope.
First and foremost, I was never supposed to be convicted. Second is, life is life in Pennsylvania. So,
when you get that sentence, do you say that's it? I'm dead.
Oh no,
dying in jail. What do you? Or do you say, hey, I'm still gonna appeal it, and the truth is gonna come out?
Yes, sir. It's I was young at the time. I was illiterate education-wise. I was illiterate to the law, so I had just I enrolled in school, got my education, got my GED, I got some college credits, and I started teaching myself law. And at the same time, when I first got to prison, I was passed a big book in the law library. I asked the guy, I said, I'm innocent, I need help. And I'm on my appeal process. And he's like, well, everybody says that.
Right.
But then he put a book in front of me for like 3,000 pages called Pennsylvania Criminal Rules and Procedures. And I'm looking at this book like I can't barely, I'm damn near illiterate. So how the hell am I read a 3,000
law journal?
Yeah, like I'm looking at this. I got a headache just looking at the book.
Right.
So to make a long story short, as my education forwarded, I began to understand it, and I started to see exactly what took place in my case. I had a couple old timers that was around me in the prison that they helped me with certain things, and I got convicted in '97. I was representing myself in 1999.
Okay. So I'm just going to show a short clip on News 12, which shows a little bit about your case. So let's go ahead and roll that clip.
It's the hardest thing I've ever been through in my life, trying to fight for justice.
Taza Salvado wants to right a wrong. Her fiancé, Lorenzo Johnson, has been in prison for almost 2 decades for a murder she says he never committed.
I know he's innocent, and I won't stop fighting.
Back in 1995, Johnson was 22 years old. He's accused of being a lookout in a drug deal that went bad in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. His conviction was reversed 3 years ago, but that decision was overturned, sending the Yonkers man back behind bars.
That's every exonoree's nightmare.
Jeffrey Deskovic, a Peekskill native, served 16 years for a rape and murder he didn't commit. Now his Manhattan-based foundation is fighting for Johnson's freedom.
Free Lorenzo Johnson! Free Lorenzo Johnson!
They say new evidence shows Johnson was in New York when the murder happened and that prosecution witnesses were coerced.
Just acknowledge you made a mistake. I mean, be heroic. Why fight to preserve and continue an injustice?
His mother feels like she lost her son twice.
I pray to God every day. God is great and God is wonderful. I never give up on him, and I will never give up on him. One day he'll be back home free.
Now this group of supporters is boarding this bus to Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, the next step in their efforts to free Lorenzo Johnson, and never giving up hope. In Manhattan, Grace New, News 12.
Okay, so let me ask you this. While in prison, I'm going to talk about that. The life was like, what was it like with your family? Were you in prison in New York or Pennsylvania?
Pennsylvania.
So you weren't even in your home state. You're out of state. What was your family sticking with you? Did they believe you were innocent, or did they believe that, hey, maybe we don't know Lorenzo and he committed this horrible murder?
Now my family knows me and they know I was innocent, but it was like, when you fighting against a prosecution that's, has misconduct involved, that's not straightforward, it's like trying to breathe underwater.
Right. Did your family come visit you while you were in prison?
Yes.
And so they kept you going. But what's it like to serve time for? I mean, I've discussed this with Jeff because I can't even imagine it. But what is it like? It's bad enough to serve time. What's it like to serve time for a crime that you didn't commit? Can you give us a little insight on that? What's your mental state like?
Well, one thing for sure is something I wish on nobody. And you got to be strong-minded if you're fighting, because there's a lot of guys in prisons that's innocent. Some is fighting, some is not fighting. Some gave up hope because the powers that be literally crushed them, and they was innocent, so they feel they couldn't, beat them. So they just conform to, the prison politics and stuff like that go on in prison. So I say that to say, me, myself, I didn't have the luxury to really sit around and mope. I had to, get things done. There's timetables, that, your appeal got to be filed by. And when I started representing myself, your time is strict. Like, you might have 14 days to file a petition.
So when you're in prison, did you have hope that you would one day get released?
I knew I was going to get released. I just didn't know when.
So you in your mind, you just knew it was a matter of time.
I knew I was going to get out, but I didn't know when. And the average innocent prisoner that has assistance and that has been exonerated spends at least 13 and a half to 15 years in prison.
Unbelievable.
But there's many more that surpass that number by a landslide that's not even talked about.
Okay. So you ended up in 2012, you were released. How did that come about?
On October 4th, 2011, the Third Circuit Court of Appeals in Philadelphia vacated my sentence on the grounds of insufficient evidence.
Who filed that petition to have that done?
Michael Wiseman and the Capital Habeas Unit from out of Philadelphia.
Is that an innocence type thing, or
Nah,
are they paid attorneys?
They're not paid attorneys. They're an organization, that they regular help with death row, but I wasn't on death row and they assisted me.
Okay, so you served. It's interesting. I sent a recap of some of the things I was going to do to Jeffrey, and I said that you served 16 years in prison, and he wrote back and he corrected it and said 16 and a half. And somebody might look at it and say, well, Gary, Jeff, why you nitpicking? I said 16 years, but then I thought about it. I said, Jesus, that's another 6 months that this man spent in jail. And I would want to know, too, that I want everyone to know it's 16 and a half years that you spent. So now you're released from prison, and you have to be thinking, oh, my God, my day's finally here. What was that like when you were released, from prison?
It was surreal. Like, I was waiting for that. I was waiting for that day for a long time, and my mother's older, my family's older, my kids is older, and once that door opened and I walked out, like, it didn't hit me until a little while later.
Right. So what is the process? So you were out for how long?
148 days.
And what ended up happening that you had to go back?
The United States Supreme Court reinstated my conviction, and with a per curiam decision.
With what?
A per curiam decision.
What does that mean?
A per curiam decision is basically you don't know who signed off on it.
So, but where did this come from? Because you would think if they released it, did somebody say, "Hey, re-look at this and send them back," or
what happens is, the normal procedures is they let your lawyer, legal team file briefs or have oral arguments to the matter. I wasn't awarded that. They sent instructions, for me to go back to the Third Circuit Court of Appeals and look at what they did and basically turn it back over.
So do you get a letter saying, "Hey, Lorenzo, how do you find out that it's all been overturned? You have to."
I was at work. It was early in the morning. I was at work, and my lead attorney called me, and he was crying on the phone. I really couldn't make out what he was saying, but at the end of it, he said your conviction was reinstated, and it was like I got numb instantly. Like that's every innocent prisoner that's released. That's their worst nightmare.
Absolutely.
And when I heard this, I was stuck on the phone. I was at work, and I had to leave. So I called my supervisor on the job, and I said, I gotta go. From there, I drove down to 72nd Street at that time. The foundation. I drove straight down to Jeffrey Deskovic Foundation, and I called them before I got there, let everybody there know what was taking place. And before I got there, they was already on the phones with the lawyers in Philadelphia to see what's going on and see if anything can be done. And when I got there, it's like everybody was, they knew what took place, and I just went in the back office and just sat down in the back room and tried to gather my thoughts. But at the same time, I'm calling family members and supporters, letting them know what took place.
So Jeff, when did your organization get involved in in Lorenzo's case?
Well, we started help when he originally came home. We helped him reintegrate, and we also became friends as well. And so when this decision came down, we tried to make moves for Lorenzo to try to prevent him from returning, but nothing worked, and nobody wanted to get involved. So I had to drive him back to prison because otherwise, he was going to just take a bus and go back.
So did the two of you? I would imagine. I should say, did the two of you have a conversation and say, "Hey, Jeff, maybe I don't want to go back," or you say, "Hey, Lorenzo, maybe you should just run because this is unfair"? Well, do you have this? Well, everything has to go through your head.
So never
go to Mexico.
Never been told before, but I'll say it now because it never happened. So there's no criminality. But I encourage Lorenzo to run.
Right.
And Lorenzo,
because that's a natural thing.
That's a natural thing. And Lorenzo was like, "Look, no, because I want to stay. I want to clear my name." And that path dictates that I have to go back to prison for the legal process to continue. But if you run, then you lose your appeals, you forfeit it. So he was a stronger man than me in that moment. So he made that decision, and that car ride back was a really emotional.
Yeah, tell us about that.
Crazy car ride. I mean, we were taking turns, consoling each other and telling each other it's only going to be a couple of months, and then
did you believe that in your head? In your mind?
You have to, but then in the next minute, the roles are reversed, and now he's telling that to me because he can see that I'm in disbelief and shock, and he is, and then half the time we can't believe we're actually in a car driving back so he can resume a life without parole sentence, right? Being wrongfully convicted on the same case. And then he's getting phone calls in from people, and they're all it doesn't help that they're all telling him to run as well.
Right.
So it was kind of a surreal and nightmarish return back. We even had a last meal at a lunch with Latasha Williams, who was an ardent Lorenzo Johnson supporter.
Wow, just unbelievable. We're running short on time, but what I wanted to get across to the viewers is this is a real person behind wrongful conviction. This man lost 16 and a half the first time, then 5 years, so a total of how many years?
21 and a half.
21 and a half years for a crime that he didn't commit. Jeffrey, how many years did you spend?
16 years.
16. What a life ruin. And Lorenzo was, in fact, in the 100 days that you were out, you were working. You have a child who was raised all those years without you, and thank God you're doing what you're doing now. But and we really got to wrap it up. And you can read more about the Jeffrey Deskovic Foundation. And I urge everybody to do that. But I do want to ask a question. Why are you speaking out now, Lorenzo? You could just go away into the sunset. You're out of prison. I believe there's no way they can come back and take you back again. Why are you? I've asked Jeff this before. I'm asking, why are you doing this? Why don't you just go away and enjoy your life? They took so much away from you.
Some people, this becomes all they know. And unfortunately, I furthered my education in prison, but this right here, the passion ran so deep. And I saw other people around me that suffered for what I was suffering from. I'm an avid writer on wrongful convictions, articles. Jeffrey helped me when I went back for the 5 years. He gave me a connection at the Huffington Post, which I write for them also.
Yeah, the foundation we worked, in connection with, the Pennsylvania Innocence Project, Michael Wadsman, the Federal Health Habeas Capital Unit, lots of other people. It was a collaborative effort just to get Lorenzo free.
And the reintegration is big too, because listen, the guy he spent so much of his time. He can come out and crash. We hear about people who come. You had somebody you got out who I think had a heart attack after they were released and died.
William Lopez died a year and a half after being out.
Horrible.
Massive asthma attack.
Yeah. So you came in. You had to reintegrate into society. And from what I understand, the government had little to no roles. Facilities or anything to help you with this. It's like, hey, you're on your own. Go figure it out.
This is what takes place, and unfortunately, I suffered from a government that didn't even want to acknowledge that they was wrong, leading for me to take a no contest plea to even get out of prison.
Which, unfortunately, we don't have time, but you took a nolo contender, which is a no contest plea. But and that's why I said at the beginning, it's important to know that Jeffrey only helps people who are innocent. You took this plea for reasons that you wanted to get out. Your family was getting older. Basically, you were exonerated by the higher court. Basically, that means that you were exonerated and they took you back, and you just had a way to get out and be done, and you took this plea. But it's unfortunate because that takes away from a lot of, it is bittersweet. I think that's the word. But again, the fact that you're out there fighting, I really, truly commend it. As I've said to Jeff, he's my hero for what he does.
He's a trailblazer, and we became good friends. So whenever he calls on me, if I could do something for the foundation, I'm there. Like, we argue over the time, you gonna be there? I'm gonna think about it, but I'm there whenever he called me, and this is just gonna continue to take place.
Great. Well, thank you for doing that. And if people want to read more, they can connect with you on Facebook, Lorenzo Johnson.
FreeLorenzoJohnson.org.
FreeLorenzoJohnson.org. Yeah. And definitely the Jeffrey Deskovic Foundation. And I've recommended that people go to him, and he's just an inspiration for anybody who's been wrongfully convicted. And now Jeff's going to law school so that he can himself get people out of jail. I'm Gary Jacobs. Thank you for joining us on Long Island Backstory.
My name is Jeffrey Deskovic, and I'm the founder and executive director of the Jeffrey Deskovic Foundation for Justice, the organization which is helping to the effort at trying to overturn the wrongful conviction of Lorenzo Johnson. Lorenzo Johnson is a resident of New York, of Westchester. His conviction was overturned after 16 and a half years upon the federal court finding that there was legally insufficient evidence, which is the same thing as a not guilty verdict. He came home, the foundation assisted him with reintegration, he got a job, he found a fiancée, he got his driver's license. None of us ever imagined that the U.S. Supreme Court would both grant cert and reinstate the conviction all in one shot, causing Mr. Johnson to be reincarcerated again in Pennsylvania for a life without parole sentence for a crime that he's innocent of. Not wanting to travel by himself back to Pennsylvania, Mr. Johnson called upon me to do the most traumatic thing I've ever had to do in my life outside of my own wrongful conviction incarceration, which was to drive him back to prison to resume a life without parole sentence for a crime he was clearly innocent of. Since Mr. Johnson's been home, there's been significant developments in the investigation. Lorenzo has a team in Pennsylvania. The foundation is simply a part of that collaborative effort. Some of the new evidence that's been uncovered would include alibis, which place him in New York. The motive witness, it was learned, had actually an improper relationship with the lead detective, in that the detective's family had unofficially adopted her. That information was never turned over to Lorenzo's lawyers. the other sole witness against him, who doesn't even say that she saw the crime, but merely instead says that she saw Lorenzo on the sidewalk while the actual alleged trigger man and the perpetrator were in an alley. She alleged that he was in effect the lookout. She says she walked by all of them and she heard a gunshot. So she doesn't even say that she saw the crime. We've learned that that witness initially told police that she did not know anything about the crime. 4 months later, after being worked on by the police, her words, not mine, suddenly now she incriminates Lorenzo. In light of this new significant evidence, there are court documents which are again seeking to free Lorenzo. The purpose of the rally and demonstration is to raise awareness about his wrongful conviction, to also bring some media attention, to let Pennsylvania Attorney General Kathleen Kane know that the world is watching this case. He's innocent. They need to stop fighting his obvious innocence. They need to turn over the 8 pages of discovery material.
Long Island Backstory is made possible in part by Americans for Legal Reform, the oldest, most successful legal group in the world. P.O. Box 2679, Huntington Station, New York 11746. Telephone 631-421-6390. Website Americans4legalreform.com.
Todd's a great guy. I mean, look at him. What a sweetheart. Attaboy. Wait, Todd, what are you doing? How totally selfish and un-Todd-like of you. Come on, Todd. Come on, man.
Long Island Backstory. Chief Correspondent Gary Jacobs is uncovering the truth on Long Island. The family court system. Red light cameras. Corruption in local politics. The heroin epidemic. Corrupt judges. At Long Island Backstory, we uncover the truth that the Cablevision news monopoly won't dare touch. We uncover the details you won't see on News 12 or in Newsday. We are local independent media at its best. Long Island Backstory, available on Public Access TV and on YouTube. Long Island Backstory.